Welcome to the RTO Superhero Podcast with me, Angela Connell-Richards, where we'll explore the complexities of compliance and how to ensure business success within your RTO. This podcast is for anyone within the training industry who wants to learn from my experience as an RTO consultant, RTO manager, trainer and assessor, and entrepreneur, as well as the experience of other experts in this field. Listen in and let us help you become the RTO superhero you want to be. Welcome to the RTO Superhero Podcast with my special guest host, Lauren Boon-Hollows, who today we're going to be discussing a very hot topic of what's happening in the education sector right now, in particular with international education and the pressures of government. Welcome, Lauren. Let's get started with...
Boxing gloves are off.
Yeah, get the boxing gloves off, yeah. I think let's get started with the big picture of how would you describe the current state of international education in Australia right now?
So look, unfortunately, we've been in this position before. Angela, you've been around for a while. I know I have too. We felt this way in 2016. We have felt this way in 2009. And we feel this way again. And look, I'm sure that in 7 or 8 years, we will feel this way again. But there does seem to be a concerted effort at the moment to significantly reduce the vet workforce and the international cohort. There are some legitimate and genuine reasons for that, which we can all understand. International students are vulnerable students. There have been and there will always be issues such as we see in ghost colleges, where you've got, really bad practices from education agents who are making false promises, and you've got RTOs who are willing to support them in that. And you've got some even worse issues where, there's some real human abuse that's occurring as well. However, unfortunately, when we go to address those issues, there's often this kind of massive course correction that happens. And what we generally see around about every 7 to 9 years is a concerted effort to, regulate international RTOs in such a way that it has a massive business impact. And I would say, if it was happening from anyone other than the government, would basically be anti-competitive practices that are put in place on a lot of these RTOs to effectively throttle the RTOs, to significantly reduce to change the regulatory environment so much that there is no security from a business perspective. There is a severe limiting of any potential to grow or develop business, and even a limit to be able to operate within fiscally responsible categories. So we're looking at international RTOs who have to have massive premises, much higher rates of students to staff, additional requirements in terms of making sure that everything is 9B compliant. The costs that are associated with that are huge. International education agencies take massive advantage. And when times get tighter, that's when the education agents really smash RTOs. So some education agents expect, upwards of 40%, which is effectively all of the profit that any potential RTO can make, and generally then some, in order to get a visa across the line. And so what we're seeing at the moment is we're just seeing huge amounts of CRICOS RTOs exiting the sector. Some are exiting by way of just selling out. Some are exiting by way of the fact that they're financially strangled. And almost all are being limited from entering the market. So look, unfortunately, it's really sad. And I guess the bigger problem that I have with it is that I'm a huge advocate of the regulator. I always have been. I believe that strong regulation, and I know you feel the same, strong regulation in our sector is really important.
Improves our quality of our education.
Absolutely. But trust in the regulator to evenly audit across everyone is also incredibly important as part of that. And at the moment, I'm seeing TAE RTOs getting their re-registration without a look-in, and international RTOs of 70 students being dragged through a 24, 36-month renewal process.
Yeah.
Whereby we're demonstrating to them that we're doing monthly or weekly QA meetings, which are logged in Accelerate's quality register. All of the assessment tools contextualized for international students, all the validations up to schedule, all the trainer matrices in place. Like I've got assessment tools that have passed passed a domestic audit in the last 3 months. That exact same assessment tool, right, is now being told that it's non-compliant for an international student. And I'm kind of going, I literally have an audit report where you've said that this is compliant, where you've looked at this assessment tool and said this is compliant. And now you're telling me 6 months later it's not.
And you were saying also when we were chatting earlier that they're making some massive changes when it comes to international students and what are the requirements. So it's putting more burden on the RTO because they've got to contextualize it. Yes, you should always contextualize your assessment tools anyway to the learner cohort. But I think from what I'm hearing is it's going overboard.
Yeah, and I think one of the challenges is that I know that there are a lot of new regulators coming through ASQA, and I know that there's a lot of them that haven't worked in RTOs before, which is always challenging. RTOs are a beast, and our industry is so diverse, but there's a lot of practical things that occur in terms of understanding how an RTO works, and practical observations is a great example of that. When you have 10, 15, 20 students that are undertaking a practical assessment, you've got 12 students, 20 students in a kitchen. You've got students running a group presentation, or you've got 6 groups of 4 students that are all working. And as a trainer and assessor, you're moving around and you're looking at what each of those students are doing, and you're making sure that everything happens safely, and you're documenting all of those interactions. And I'm always scribbling massive notes and kind of going, oh, so and so is doing this really well, right? Pull this person aside, give them that live feedback to tweak and make sure that they're meeting that competency standard. Those are the focuses, and that's the really beautiful stuff that happens when you've got like these big group training things. Like you've got the ability to kind of really kind of get that atmosphere happening where it's kind of buzzing and everyone's creating stuff, and there's so much good learning and so much good assessment and so much competency being demonstrated in those scenarios. But the practical realities of them is that you don't have a trainer and assessor sitting there with 20 iPads going through, and the focus is not on ticking a box. The focus at that point is on determining competency, and determining competency is an iterative process. And every so many years, and there's, I think over the last really 10 years, we've seen this degrade more and more. When an assessor who has their TAE, who has their industry qualifications, who has currency in TAE, who has currency in their industry, turns around and ticks a box to say they can do this, more and more and more we are saying not good enough.
Yeah.
And if that is the point, like if we're ultimately going to turn around and say, unless I as the auditor or I as the validator see it with my own eyes, you as a qualified industry trainer and assessor, you telling me that you ticking a box and signing a declaration to say that they are competent is not enough.
Sufficient. Yeah.
Right? I don't know how our industry survives that, short of having a camera on every student. Yeah. In which case we're taking away from the educative experience, the training experience, the assessment experience. And the other thing is why would I want to be a trainer? Like our industry is so short of trainers, but why would I want to be a trainer if nothing I say, nothing I do, no comment that I write is good enough for you to believe that I know that that student can do it?
Yeah, without a video or an observation.
That's right. And competency isn't determined on that one observation.
Certainly not.
It's taken over a period. It's taken from me working with that student over time. And yes, they'll have bad days, but like I've seen them do the planning and do the communication and do the skills over that period of time. So when I, as the assessor, say they can communicate, they know the safety policy, they know how to do this safely, they know how to do it within industry timeframes. But it doesn't matter how often I say that, it doesn't matter what declarations I sign, it doesn't matter how many boxes I tick, I'm consistently being told it's not sufficient. It hurts our industry. Like it just seriously hurts our industry.
So there are other issues that are coming into the reason why international education, like when we think about pre-pandemic, international education was vying for first and second position as the biggest export out of Australia. And the pandemic absolutely crashed that. But we've never got back. We've never got back to that level. And now we've got two governments that are vying for the political station right now when it comes to the election. And the big focus is on accommodation and that there is a lack of accommodation. So yes, I can understand this. We need to put Australians first, but we also need the workers. So what are your thoughts on the government trying to squash the international education market because of lack of accommodation?
I think it's just a political handball. I think it's short-sighted. I think that both major parties. In fact, I think the majority of the parties within Australia have such a fundamental lack of understanding of the benefits that international education brings in. So international education has been the top four export, just under coal, iron ore for the last, I think, 10 years. Some years making upwards of contributing $50 billion on the top line, right, to the Australian economy. Now, what then flows from that is a significant amount of workers that are open to doing jobs that potentially not a lot of Australians want to do. There is also, a huge amount of work that flows for Australians. Our RTO administrators, our university administrators, our trainers and assessors, our university lecturers. Particularly within our university sector, without the international money to prop up those universities would actually fall over. Without, the international students to support our sector, there would not be the money flowing in from international education to support a lot of the important initiatives that we run for job seekers, for asylum seekers, for trainees and for apprentices and all of the government funding programs that we do, which are so incredibly important and vital. The only reason I got into this industry was because I came from an abusive relationship. I became a trainer. I was working with moms who had come from abusive relationships as well. And I was getting them into jobs and getting them trained and getting them skilled up. And it was the most life-changing experience of my life. It was life-changing for them. And that is what that does. It's an incredibly beautiful thing, but all of that requires money to support it. There's huge education initiatives that happen for Aboriginal Torres Strait Islanders and our First Nations. And the money that we get, the $50 billion that we get from international education goes to support a lot of those initiatives and all of the other money that then flows in from it. Accommodation is an issue, right? I'm not going to lie, accommodation is an issue, but we can deal with that by deregulating the ability to build houses. And also, in order to build more houses, guess what we need? We need electricians, we need brickies, we need carpenters, we need plumbers. And all four of these areas are supported by
international education providers, yeah.
Right? They're supported by VET. So if we need more of those people, And there are people willing to come in and spend, $15,000 to $20,000 a year in order to become a brickie, and then want to, be and you can organize legislation so that you can say, right, well, if you're an international student and you're going to come in and you're going to study being a brickie, then you've got to work as a brickie. We're going to limit your work visa to you being a brickie, right? That's a really simple solution. People have been talking about it for ages. I've put it forward. I know multiple other people in industry has put it forward and gone, if you're going to come over and study something, be it electrical, be it, brickie, be it aged care, be it nursing, right? Be it hospitality, whatever you're studying, that's the industry that you can work in. And that's what you're limited to, right?
Yeah.
So effectively, international kind of becomes like a traineeship apprenticeship style as well, right? Increases the quality of the training and assessment, increases the competency. You can do all of those sorts of things. Those sorts of initiatives would be great. The initiative to turn around and go, well, we just need less international students as a blanket, but we're going to continue to allow higher education because, we need more postdocs, or we need more people studying a master's in business administration or a master's in, I don't know, postgraduate dance theory or something like. We don't need those. We don't need any of that in Australia. Limit the visas to what we need. No problems. We need builders. We need nurses. We need aged carers. We need, plumbers. Let's use the vocational education system to support building Australian skills
and fill our skills gaps in Australia.
Yeah, not target it and tick a box and say that if we think that we limit the number of international students, there is magically going to be more houses. And that's just, it's just such a short-sighted, view for both major governments to be taken. It's really, really disappointing.
My thought on this is also, what about like the regional areas? There are regional RTOs and CRICOS providers that don't have accommodation issues. Maybe they should push more funding to go or visas to go to regional areas where they can then also build those skills that we need in Australia.
Yep. And the 88-day visa is a great example of that. Quite often, I obviously live in regional Queensland, and I'm far north. And so we get a lot of people through here. We're actually coming into our winter season, which is, our busy season for the year. So we've got a huge amount of providers that are putting out there and going, hey, we will take on people for their 88 days of, regional work. We'll provide you with accommodation. And all of that, there's that opportunity when you're coming out regionally. And again, I know that there's a couple of places up here that do similar things from a study perspective, come here, study here, and build out the economy of rural and regional Australia, because again, that's a fantastic thing. We need more people to come out country in Australia.
Yeah, and I'm in Newcastle, which Newcastle also has, we've got the University of Newcastle, and there is student-specific housing that is now empty because we don't have sufficient students here to fill those at that accommodation. So my thought is, why, if we could solve the world the issues of international education, my thoughts would be, let's throw it into regional areas where they need that tourism, where they need that support of people living in the accommodation and working in those areas as well. I think there's many opportunities for where we could redirect international students.
Yeah, and look, it does form a part of our tourism economy as well. We get a lot of people who come through here, and international students will, they might start here on a holiday visa, study a little bit of English, then go onto an ELICOS visa, then jump into a vet visa. And they do stay for a long period of time. And I'm not going to lie that, there are people that overstay and there are people that take advantage of our system. And look, if you have lost your visa and you've gone through the ART process and they've said, no, you didn't meet your obligations. You weren't a good international student. You didn't meet your requirements. then you need to go home now. And that's absolutely fine. Like, I want people to operate within the legal bounds and confines of our system in the same way I want every RTO to operate within the legal bounds. I want you to provide good training. I want you to provide contextualized training. I want you to provide those support services. But if we're going to hold RTOs to, the legal standard, then hold everyone to the legal standard, right? And we need to have faith that our regulator is going to apply that. And it's, the education team at ASQA is so brilliant. They're putting out all of these practice guides. They're attending every conference. They're sitting and they're talking to they're talking to RTOs. They're actively trying to solve problems. And it's like, it's a little bit heartbreaking to know that there's like all of this beautiful work that the regulator is undertaking. But then when we get to the regulation side, if we don't then, even handedly apply it, like I get providers coming to me more and more going, it honestly doesn't matter what we do. Like, the intent is very clear that they've made a decision that we're not going to get through and we're not going to get through. And you've got like smaller providers that will turn around and go, I'm just not willing to like run my personal and my business into the ground. We're just going to give up, and then you've got other providers that are fighting for it. And, like that's a really hard thing to see. Like I've talked to several providers in the last couple of weeks who, want to start up an RTO, or they're going into their re-registration this year. And I sat down with a provider last week and I was like, you guys are really good. We've updated all your assessment tools. We've got all these quality notes. I said, but you're an international RTO. And they're like, well, what do you mean? I'm like, I don't see, this is not going to be an easy ride. You're going to get delays. You're going to be told things are non-compliant, when my professional perspective is that it's probably not. You probably are compliant, but regardless, you're in for a fight. Like, this is not going to go through easily. You're going to be in for a fight for the next 12, 18 months until we get through this next rough patch. And they're sitting there kind of going, but like, we've done everything right. Like, we've been engaged with them for like 18 months now, setting up new business processes for them, refining all of their trainer matrices, updating their assessment tools, doing all the validation, recording all of the quality meeting minutes and everything like that. It's heartbreaking to see that work going into an RTO of somebody who genuinely wants to do the right thing and not have any of it recognized when they go into an audit, because there is a validation component of like, we're trying real hard, guys, we're trying real hard. And when you see the regulator going, it's just not good enough. Like,
this is a good segue into the ASQA pressures at the moment, and in particular around assessment tools and compliance, and what you've been experiencing. We've been experiencing that pre-assessment validation is usually focusing especially on the learner cohort contextualization and industry specifics for the provider. So yes, I do agree that we do need to contextualize for the international market, but can you see what it would actually, the future will be if we continue this way in particular? But you've mentioned that ASQA is now requesting this pre-validation of assessment tools. We've seen it as well at Vivacity. Can you walk us through what this actually looks like in practice for a CRICOS RTO?
Yeah, so I guess first and foremost, I get a lot of RTOs that come to me and go, oh, but we purchase our tools pre-validated. So under the current standards, the responsibility is on the RTO to, ensure that their assessment system is compliant at all times. And part of that assessment system is having compliant assessment tools. So believing without actually validating, even under the old RTO standard, under the current RTO standards of 2015, not really enough, guys. Like, it's just, you've got to do these things yourself. So I guess that's point number one. Under the old system, what I would say is like, there was probably a lot more lenience for oh, well, we've done a pre-validation on a couple of the units. We've checked with we've checked on the provider when we've built them into the system. We've been cross-checking the mapping and we're pretty happy with that. And we've got a little bit of evidence, maybe some emails or maybe a validation form or something like that. Under the new standards, when the new, standards take over on 1/7/25, it's so black and white. It's so clear within this. Every single assessment tool needs to be pre-validated before use. Now, what that will actually look like when the audits come in of the formal new standards, I think we will see two versions of it, unfortunately. I think within the domestic market, I think there'll be a kind of a grandfathering in of like, okay, well, we've got a validation schedule in place that includes pre-validation and it includes the post-validation. So the pre-validation of like the assessment tool structures and the trialing and the testing, and the post-validation of the assessment judgment itself, right? So that when I use the term pre and post validation, that's what I mean. I know everyone's got their own, testing, moderation, validation. Won't get into that today. I think for internationals, they are going to be held to a very strong line of show me the pre-validation form that has been done for every single assessment tool that you have, that you've delivered in the last year. And it's very easy for me to pull that report because I can go and I can pull your last AVS, AVET mislodgement, and I can filter all of the units of competency that you've delivered in the last 12 months, and I can pick 6 or 7 of those at random, and you need to be able to show me that you've done pre-validation on them. And I would hazard a guess that there's maybe 2% of RTOs out there that would be able to meet that requirement.
I agree.
Like the vast majority of RTOs do validation poorly. There's some great there's tools out there now, like obviously, we both know Vanessa at Prickly the Sweet. Her whole thing is validation, produces that automated report and everything like that. AI is getting better and better at kind of starting to review. And I think that we're going to continue to see that technology flesh out. But how RTOs document, and again, even with some RTOs, they may be doing it, but not documenting it. Doing and not documenting is a big problem for RTOs. So I think we're going to see a really strong adherence to like, no, you're delivering this tool, demonstrate to me that you've actually done some sort of a check yourself as the RTO that the assessment tool is compliant. Like, show me that you actually, know that what you're delivering is compliant. And to be fair, like, yeah, you should be. Like, as an RTO, if you are delivering an assessment tool, you should have checked that assessment tool can actually, take on, demonstrate competency, meet all of the requirements, gather all of the required evidence. That's fair and reasonable. And there's kind of something with that RTOs have been like bucking a little bit, like they've been passing the ball a little bit on that one with the whole, we purchase compliant context, we purchase compliant assessment tools, or, even people who purchase from us, like our assessment tools are contextualized for the state and the cohort and the delivery model. But even our assessment tools come with like a little pre-validation in the mapping guide to say, hey, as the RTO, I've actually checked this. So now I know that, for us, we're actually fleshing out that process and kind of going, okay, we're no longer actually just going to build the tool for you in your system. We're actually going to need to start having some meetings with you and actually like documenting that pre-validation process with you, which is super easy to do, guys. Honestly, get an AI note taker, jump onto a Teams meeting, spend half an hour reviewing the assessment tool, get your AI notes, chuck them into your quality register, Bob's your uncle, you're done. Like, it's not rocket science, but it's time, and there's a lot of jobs that have to be done in RTO land. And
it's not as much time as it used to be thanks to AI. So we can do it much quicker. But a bigger thing that we already have discussed before we got online was When you're looking at these requests that we're receiving from ASQA with regards to pre-validation, is there consistency across providers, or are you seeing targeted behaviour, especially towards international providers?
Yeah, unfortunately, and look, this is just my experience. And so there may be consultants out there, or there may be RTOs out there who have a completely different experience. My experience at the moment is very different. And unfortunately, it's come to a point now where I'm advising clients differently based on whether or not they're domestic or whether they're international. I've got domestic clients that are going to go through registration this year. They're very solid, and I've said to them, look, I think we'll be okay. I think we'll make sure that we can robustly defend this and we can robustly defend that. But I'm confident that we'll get through. I wouldn't say that to an international RTO at the moment. I've already outright told RTOs that are looking at registering as CRICOS, I've said, don't do it. I've said, wait 18 months. Because you're not going to get through in the next 18 months anyway. It's going to drag all of your resources, and you're likely just going to be spending money for nothing. So let's not do it now. Let's wait 18 months. I've got, clients that are going through, they're going to be putting in re-registration this year. And I've said to them, we're in for a hell of a fight. I think our best case scenario is that, we can drag the re-registration out for 18 months to a point that the regulator calms down, that the election is over, that things settle, that they realize the importance of international education, that we start losing that many students and we start losing that many RTOs. The government feels they can tick a box and say they've had a win, and they can return to normal auditing. And this is what's happened every other time.
Everything
swings and roundabouts in international education, but I've been very clear, my advice, the road forward and the standard that the clients are being held to is, for me, for the experiences that I've seen, very different across RTOs. And I will continue to provide advice to clients very differently based on whether or not they are international or domestic. And again, I understand some of the reasons for that. I get the regulators' reasons for wanting to apply pressure. I know some of it is external to them. They're getting advice from ministers. They're getting ministerial directions.
And border protection.
Exactly. It is heartbreaking. It's heartbreaking because there's a lot of good things that international education does. And every time we go through one of these processes, it hurts the Australian reputation. It has, as a small business provider myself, I feel it a lot more this time around, having run a business for 5 years than I did last time, where I didn't really have that concept of how much you sacrifice to start up a business. And watching people sacrifice and give up their own wages to pay their staff, or, to make sure that they can meet ASQA's requirements, or, dole out more money to lawyers and things like that, when they are genuinely trying to do the right thing for their students and for themselves. And for their staff is really disappointing.
Yeah, we're seeing that in particular for initial registration with CRICOS, it's taking a long time before they actually get to an audit. And then when we do, there's very much a focus on the learner cohort and secondary language. This is the big thing, and having clear and detailed instructions for the international student market when it comes to the assessment tools. But one of the things, and we've raised this already, is there's a very big difference between when assessment tools are validated by the auditors for domestic compared to international. They seem to be a lot harder on the international. It seems to have increased compared to what it was in the past. You were talking earlier about this exact example of the same assessment tools, but for domestic and international. What was the main differences that they were targeting? What was the evidence that they were looking for?
So I think there's two areas with internationals that there's a much stronger focus on. I think the first is authenticity. So obviously all students are getting more adept at using ChatGPT. We all are. And being able to identify authentic submissions is becoming more challenging. I know at Anawire, we balance that by like any submission, like if there's a presentation or if there's a report that's due or a paper that's due, we always do written questions. But the written questions and then the paper and the report are generally then finalized with a presentation whereby the assessor has an opportunity to kind of go, right, well, I know you've written all of this and you've probably written it with ChatGPT, but let's actually find out that you know what you're talking about, right? So it gives them a really good opportunity. And to us, that's the best authenticity mechanism that we can build in, right? And I know universities are going very much the same way. I had a chat just last week with a couple of university lecturers who are saying, they're moving to a lot more verbal assessments and things like that in light of ChatGPT. So I think that's a big focus, is like calling, questioning whether or not the assessments are actually authentic to the students. And that issue exists with every student. Apprentices and trainees know it as well as, any other international student. So I don't see why that should be regulated differently across one or the other, but it's being brought up in internationals and it's not being brought up with domestics at the moment.
Domestics, yeah.
Then the other issue is the issue in and around observations being undertaken by our trainers and assessors. And again, at the end of the day, yes, we have tick boxes. Okay. Almost every RTO has to utilize observation checklists. A good observation checklist is not a copy and paste of the performance criteria. It's this is the skill that we're looking at, and then this is what it looks like. So it's built out with a lot of benchmarks of like, okay, well, if we're talking about good communication, we're talking about thinking about the tone and pace, and we're thinking about the body language, and we're making sure that they're utilizing industry terminology correctly, right? We've got all those benchmarks that then sit underneath it. And what we're seeing from the regulator at the moment is a questioning of like saying, well, you've got a checklist, but that's not sufficient. And I'm like, okay, well, I agree with you that a checklist is not sufficient, but we don't have a checklist. We've got a checklist backed up by, very detailed benchmarks, backed up by generally a form. So like if a student is creating a recipe or, building a recipe, they'll fill out a recipe card on like what the recipe was and, how they had to, adapt it for a customer request, or what techniques they used and what ingredients they used. So they fill something out that kind of supports what was actually observed. Done. Same with job cards, like if somebody's building a wall, we put the take 5 with it, right? Or we put the swims with it or something like that. So no matter what skill we have that we're assessing, generally there's like a supporting, document behind it. There's an observation checklist and there's robust benchmarks. Those three things together are the foundations of a strong assessment tool. And what we're starting to see come out again is this thing saying, but that's still not sufficient. And I'm kind of going, well, you've got a qualified trainer and assessor. You guys have agreed that they are industry current. You guys have agreed that we're providing professional development for them. So they're a qualified trainer. You agree they're a qualified trainer. They're saying that they've seen this being done. We've got supporting evidence from the students. We can't upload videos to ASQA portals, right? So we don't have, like, if you want us to, we'll take videos and we'll upload the videos there, but you won't actually allow ASQA uploads of videos. So we've got pictures of the final dish. We've got a form signed by the student to say all the steps that they took. We've got observations by a trainer, and you're still calling bullshit as to whether or not it was done.
Yeah.
I don't know how else we can demonstrate authenticity short of recording every single student, uploading it into the student portal, and just having assessors sit there and mark. And the practical business reality of a decision like that is going to be a reduction in the quality of training, a reduction in the quality of assessment, and an offshoring of a sugar load of trainer and assessor jobs to countries where it is more financially viable. Because I can get a TAE qualified trainer in Philippines to sit there and mark. But, you know, I would much rather have a trainer on the ground in Australia. And if our governments are, as they say they are, for more jobs in Australia, for building the Australian economy, right, then we want to focus on having our trainers training and assessing live in person with our students, and that's what we want them to be focused on. But if we want really good trainers, and we set some pretty high benchmarks for trainers and assessors in Australia, if we're going to set those high benchmarks for them, then when they say and when they sign a declaration that the student is competent and that they've seen them do that skill, and we've got supporting evidence that they've done that skill, we have to believe them. We have to say, okay, you've seen them do it. You've signed to say them do it. You've got some additional evidence from what they've been doing. I'm not going to put a camera in every classroom and make an assumption that you're going to lie to me every time you fill out an observation checklist. We can't do it. We're going to lose all of our trainers and assessors.
Yeah. And I can see this issue, and like they're trying to get more trainers back in, but they're causing more issues when assessors need to do more of this type of work. I'm just going to change track a little bit. Have you seen evidence of ASQA using minor non-compliances as justification to question someone's fit and proper person status? And what procedures does this set? Well, precedent does this set?
Yeah, so look, I mean, obviously ASQA has been going after fit and proper person for a while now. New fit and proper person came out last year. And I think you and I had a chat about this, and we were both like, absolutely, like, if someone has had their RTO shut down before, you know, if they've been that quiet, shadowy figure that operated during the vet fee help scandal, like, we need to understand who is operating RTOs. And I think that's fair. I think there's probably a few tweaks that I would like to make to the fit and proper form. Like at the moment, you've got to like, I have clients even disclosing like all of their speeding tickets and stuff like that. Like, so like they're getting pretty big. My fit and proper person is now huge. Like it's like 40 pages or something like that. It's big. So I understand the rationale for it, and I think the intent is very good. Unfortunately, I think the road to hell is paved with good intentions. And in this particular case, what I've seen now in the last 3 audit reports that have come through is kind of a statement to the effect of, you didn't address, it's taken you 2 audit reports, or we had to identify the non-compliance. You didn't pick it up in the first place. So therefore, you're unable to effectively manage a quality system, right? And therefore, that makes you not a fit and proper person, right? And I think that I think we've got to be really careful with this, because no RTO is compliant 100% of the time. Every single one of our major TAFEs have received an intent to cancel at some point. And we're not about to turn around to TAFE Directors Australia and say it's full of, unfit and proper persons, right?
Yeah.
Half those people then go into work within governments and become regulators. So, all of us have worked in RTOs, and there is no RTO in Australia that is 100% compliant 100% of the time. God knows we try, right? God knows we try. But it's full of people, it's full of students, it's full of human beings that are going to make mistakes, right? 100%. So what I want to determine at an audit, and, what I try and determine when I'm working with clients, and I mean, to some extent, like price point plays a role in this, right? I'm like, well, unless you're like really willing to invest in like getting your RTO right, and where you're willing to put in systems, and you're willing to like put your money where your mouth is, I'm not willing to work with you, right? And there's been several clients where like I've gone in, I've taken a look at it all, and I'm like, it doesn't matter what I tell you, you're not going to listen to me, you're not going to make the changes. At the end of the day, you're chasing dollars. And I don't want to be associated with somebody that chases dollars, because as consultants, we've got to protect our reputations pretty fiercely. Otherwise we end up with more problems for ourselves than anyone else, right? And there's bad consultants out there that
We'll take anybody.
So I think the intent of the fit and proper person is good. I think that every RTO is going to have non-compliances that the regulator is going to pick up on. I think this is particularly the case when regulator expectations change over time and the interpretations of standards change over time. And we can't, that is always going to be a thing. It happens in WHS, it happens in quality management and ISO systems, it happens within education systems. The interpretation of how we need to evidence standards is going to continue to change over time. But as a result of that, as a regulator, we have to give a little bit of grace. And in the past, there's been statements made by regulators as to we're coming out to regulate you. This is not, this is not an improvement process that you're going through. But to some extent it is, because when an RTO hasn't had a regulatory interaction for 7, 8, 9, 10, 15 years, right? They're going off of ASQA practice guides, and they're going off of, professional development that gets put out there, of which there is a wide variety. If this was like the Singaporean government, right? In Singapore, there's one TAE provider, right? That's the Singaporean government, right? They're very restrictive on who actually gets to get put through their TAE process, or their the equivalent of their RTO process. And if ASQA is going to become the TAE delivery person, right? Only ASQA can teach people how to do it, then that's fine. You can hold them to a higher standard. But there's so much PD in our market. There's so many conflicting opinions. If an RTO has got evidence that they're demonstrating that they're trying, but they haven't quite met the mark, the regulator has been really good in the past at understanding and kind of going, I've gone through audits where the RTO has, let's say, 120 units on scope. They've got a timeline for getting all of them updated. They've identified, previously, and maybe they're, I think I did one early last year. They had spent the last 2 years developing new assessment tools. They were about 45% of the way through. They were still using the old non-compliant assessment tools, and they were kind of yeah, we know these aren't good enough, but we know our training practices are good. We know the kids are coming out compliant. We just know that the way we document it is not strong enough, right? And we were very upfront with the regulator that this is the new process. We've we've developed the schedule in line with what we deliver the most of. So we risk rated and we risk reviewed all of this, and the high risk stuff we've updated, and the ones with the with the most vulnerable cohorts, we've updated those. But we've got these ones which are workplace trainees. We've got a plan to update those assessment tools and get them compliant over the next 6 months, but we're not there yet. And the regulator was so great. They were we understand, we can see you're trying, we can see you're investing, we love this process that you're doing. And it was such a wonderful experience. The audits I had, up to August of last year with the regulator, they were so wonderful. There was so much listening happening. There was so many good communications happening. And then come August time, the communications just dropped off. And all of a sudden
flipped,
there was it was close. Yes, you'd have a quick closing meeting or a quick opening meeting, but that engagement and dialogue of understanding how the RTO operates and, digging into like those tools. No, it all went to like, I'm just going to review the documents that you submit.
So what do you think
it's
happened?
like,
what do you think happened at that time?
look, I don't know whether or not it was, I think part of it was probably a resourcing issue. Like, obviously all regulators have to deal with like, do I have enough staff? And I don't know whether or not it was kind of like that, just the numbers of applications or the numbers of issues were going up so much. And so they didn't have the time, like they don't have the time to spend working and talking to the clients and understanding how they operate. But a lot of the last ones have literally like we did have one with a course accreditation last year, and we were working and talking with ASQA, and they were explaining to us like the little tweaks that we needed to make. And it was, again, that was just a wonderful interaction. Like anytime the regulator comes to a provider and genuinely seeks to like understand what they're doing, and they can see that there's like such a good intent that sits behind it, I find there's a positive outcome, right? But when all of the regulation is like very limited meetings and majority of it is just reviewing documentation, I think as a regulator, you fall into a habit of making negative assumptions about providers. And I get why. They have a risk-based approach, so they deal with the worst of the worst. And when you deal with the worst of the worst, like I know it's the same for some ART consultants, they deal with the worst of the worst. So it's so easy to kind of get that in your
mentality.
Head that like everyone's dodgy, all of these are ghost colleges, there's no genuine
Particularly if you go
providers
from one to another to another. Yeah.
You would everything hard. Like, I mean, like that, I try and stay out of ART for that reason, right? Like that's why I love working with providers, on an ongoing basis, because I get to see all the good stuff that happens. I get to see the graduations. I get to see, like the students being like, oh, this is amazing, or staff kind of going, oh my God, I've learned so much. That's the really good stuff. But as a regulator, the education team sees a lot of that. And I think that's why the education team is such a positive force for ASQA, right? Because they go out and they have those talks. They go to the conferences where like you've got all of these, RTOs that are like super pumped to like do the right thing and engage in, but the education team and the regulations team's experiences are chalk and cheese. Yeah. Right. One gets to see the best of industry. The other one sees the worst of our industry. And like our industry is amazing. And 90% of providers are trying to do the right thing. Like I genuinely believe that in my heart. But holy cow, you and I have seen what the 10% do. And it's heartbreaking and it's horrific.
They trash the name of all the good RTOs that are out there.
They do so much bad work, and they and it's the good RTOs. It's the 90% of the good RTOs that have to pay for what that 10% of RTOs do, because it's that 10% that makes the headlines, right?
Yes.
And it's that 10% that has led to the government now both governments turning around and saying, international education doesn't provide anything for this country. It's just taking up our housing, right? It's just not true. Like I've sat through so many graduations where, the parents have flown over from the country and they've been like, my child achieved a diploma, like this is so amazing, like our entire family is like, given everything for this kid to come and get this experience from Australia. And they have such beautiful beliefs about like the Australian people and the Australian system, and like there's an exporting of our values that happens, and there's so much goodwill exported with international education, but we're losing, we will lose all of that again, and we've gone through this before, and I am sure that we will again. We'll get to 2028 and we'll start to build it back, but we don't need to. Like this is all unnecessary. And so for those of you that are going to the polls or talking to your local members or are part of the vocational education and training system, guys, you all need to become bigger advocates of it. Like become an advocate of our international education system, become an advocate of the vocational education and training system. Because if you want houses, if you want a plumber, if you want an electrician, if you want someone to take care of you when you go into a retirement community, if you want a nurse, right, you need to be advocates of our system.
Yeah. And the big thing is and it's not just focus on the international, and you touched on this earlier, what the benefits are of international students in Australia. They actually financially support the RTOs to be able to deliver more to the domestic market as well. So, and it also gives the domestic market a good opportunity to learn from other cultures. So there are so many benefits of international education for both domestic and international. And I think it's something that we're going to lose. And I hope it's not 2028 before we build back up our international education market again. So Let's now focus on, if we could provide the solutions to ASQA and to the government, what changes would you like to see from ASQA to make the compliance process more transparent and supportive, especially for quality-focused CRICOS RTOs?
Look, within the CRICOS space, I think the regulatory framework is there. I do believe that ASQA, the guides that they've created are a great start. I think it would be good for the regulatory team to understand that part of their role is educative, right? Every audit is educative, and I think an initial determination gets made. Okay, are you going to be willing to listen and improve? Okay, and obviously there's going to be some circumstances where the breaches are so bad that we can't give you another opportunity. However, I think when the breaches are minor, as to we can see, we're going to come out and we're going to observe. We're going to see what your training looks like, and we're going to see what your practical training looks like. And if we can see that the students are showing up, and we can see that the training is actually occurring, and we can see that the assessment process is authentic in that practical skills, be they business practical skills of communicating and presenting and negotiating, or what we would typically call old-fashioned hard skills of building homes, connecting wires, physically creating a dish, caring for a person, caring for a simulated person, changing a diaper, right? Any of those things are being done, and you've got the resources to do them, and you've got the trainers to deliver them, and the students are showing up, and everyone's giving most people are giving a genuine face effort to try and do the right thing. We're going to give you that leeway and that grace, right, to improve. And we're going to explain to you in very clear terms where you're not meeting the standards, and we're going to provide you with how you need to then go about addressing that. Okay. And that could be,
or what is the evidence we're looking for.
That's right. We're going to give you an idea of what we're looking for, and we're going to operate in good faith that you're operating in good faith. And where we find providers that are not operating in good faith, all right, even then we are going to be very clear where they are not meeting the standard, and that standard is going to be consistent, because faith in the regulator, faith in our government is an incredibly important part of being able to continue to see our industry grow. And when RTOs lose faith in the regulator, they go rogue. Quite often, it then becomes, how can I get past the regulator, as opposed to how can I meet the quality standard?
Work with them.
And we've seen that happen before in the past. We saw it in the wake of 2009. We saw it in the wake of 2016, that the strategy was, well, let's just take him to ART, right? Like, there will be people who will be willing to blow that money, and we'll waste the regulator's time along with it. There are people, the other strategy was, all right, fine, I'm going to call in my favors. I'm going to go to the ministers, and, none of those strategies are good for the regulator or good for our industry. And
good for Australia. It's not. We need to have that quality education. We need, when I talk about transparency, we need transparency of what is sufficient evidence. Like, I remember when we used to have the evidence guide. That would have been 2015, I suppose. They had that evidence guide, and in that evidence guide, they actually showed you, this is the evidence that we're looking for.
Yeah.
I think we need to go back to that.
Look, to be honest, there are that many RTOs that, for example, okay, ASQA does go and audit RTOs, and they pass their assessment tools.
Yeah.
Talk to the RTO and say, hey guys, are you open to your assessment tool being put up there as an example? Because I don't know many RTOs that wouldn't do that. Like I've put my hand up as Anna Wire, as a resource provider that literally sells my resources. I've said to the regulator on that many occasions, I've gone like, dude, take my assessment tools. I'll give you an assessment tool from every training package. I will let your auditors go to town on them. We will get them so that every single auditor thinks they're compliant. And then I will happily sign over that IP to you, and you can put them up on the ASQA website as an example of a compliant assessment tool. Like I honestly, if that would help our industry, I've got no problems with that. I have no issues with that whatsoever. Right? And there are so many people that want to help and but those sorts of like a concrete example of what a good checklist looks like, right? Pick a unit, BSB TWK 201, BSB SUS 211, right? Which like tens of thousands of those units are issued a year. HLT AID 009, right? Those hundreds of thousands of that unit is issued a year. Take a unit, show us what a compliant assessment tool looks like, and I can guarantee that you will have RTOs adopting that style of an assessment tool. RTOs want to do the right thing.
And what type of evidence do they need to demonstrate to contextualize as well? Because course we're always going to fall back on ASQA. We're always going to fall back on, well, you need to contextualize it for your individual RTO. What does that look like? How do we do that?
That's right. But like, that's it. Like it's, okay, so that's in the instructions, or that's in the benchmarks for the observations, right? Or that's, like, again, like, that's in the exemplar responses, for the written questions. Like it's there, give RTOs some tangible examples, because if you've given them a whole bunch of really tangible examples of like what a good policy procedure looks like, what a good TAS template. I've been begging them for years to go produce a TAS template, produce a trainer matrix template. Like seriously, guys, give those 2 documents. Every RTO will adopt it. They will adopt it. I promise you. And it means less sales for you and me. But honestly, you and me would be like the first people to put our hands up and go, I don't care. I'm willing to lose the revenue on those particular products to see our industry be more consistent and to see our regulator, support.
But even the previous standards, so I think it was in the 2011, 2012, they actually had the actual areas that they wanted within the TAS, which they haven't even got anything like that now. But at least then you knew. We wrote our TAS around those exact standards, and we did it in order of the standards as well. And that made it much easier. Now, when you've been in the industry for as long as we have, we've seen what works, what doesn't work. And I mean not only what works and what doesn't work for ASQA, I mean for the trainer, for the RTO as well, and making sure that we've got that framework. And I do agree with that. And I've seen so many people going, why don't they just provide us, like the government just provide us with all the documents and all the policies and procedures and things like that? And I'm going, well, how do they do that when there's so many different
business versus what works for TAFE is not going to be the same thing.
So you do need to have it so that it's contextualized for your industry sector, for your learner cohorts, so your RTO and what makes you unique. State funding, yes, definitely as well. All right, so we've talked a lot today, and it's been a very, very big topic for us to talk on. If there's one thing you want policymakers and ASQA to understand about the CRICOS sector right now, what would that be?
I want the government to know that they're missing an opportunity. Removing international education is not going to get us the houses that we need. Deregulation and supporting more strategically directing our visas to the qualifications that we need is what is going to get us more houses. Because in order to get more houses, we need more builders, more brickies, more carpenters, more electricians, and more plumbers. And that's what we need in Australia. And we are not going to get that through trainees and apprentices only. I would love it if we could. My son's just starting an electrical apprenticeship. I'm so proud of him. I have another son coming up, and I'm sure he will go into an apprenticeship as well. Both my boys have been massive recipients of the vocational education sector, and they both know that that's where we're going to be directing them, because skills are crucial. Right. But a better way to address the international crisis would be to link employment of your visa with the qualification that you are studying. So if you are studying to be an engineer, you need to be working as an engineer. If you are studying as a nurse, you need to be doing work in that field of nursing, right? Not as an actual nurse, but like, working in a hospital in some extent. Or working, like if you're studying to be a chef, you need to be working in a restaurant. If you are studying to work in studying aged care or community services, you need to be working in that industry, right? Link it to that. That will naturally probably shrink the vocational market. But what it will also do is it will also ensure that the international market is actually supporting our skill shortages, the areas and the skill shortages that need it, because we are always going to have a skill shortage in Australia, and the international students that come in, to lose a $50 billion industry in Australia at this particular point in time with the international market as it is, I think we are being silly. I think our politicians are being very silly, and I think that it's okay for every normal person to be talking to their government and to be saying, hey guys, I get that this is the issue that you're saying, but maybe it's not the win that you think it is.
Yep, totally agree with those. And finally, what gives you hope right now for the future of international education in Australia? And hopefully it's before 2028.
What gives me hope is the fact that we've weathered these storms before, and we still have a thriving vocational education market. We still have brilliant providers in the public and the private sector. We still have passionate consultants, CEOs, RTO trainers that are still willing to fight for our industry. And those people change over time, because I get you can only fight for so long. But there's so much good that our industry does that I just genuinely, I get to see so many trainers and developers and RTOs investing in just creating these beautiful programs and changing people's lives, that I can't be anything other than positive. Like, I can't be anything other than a passionate, positive advocate for our sector, because what we do in this industry, they don't do it it doesn't happen in the schools. It doesn't happen in the universities. It happens in the RTO colleges. So I think that's something worth fighting for.
Yeah, and I've experienced this personally myself, and it's something I've spoken about many, many times. Education changes lives, and it's not just the student, it's the lives around the student as well. And you do see a big impact with that sector, because there are applicable skills that they can apply. And also not only apply them, grow through that as well. Well, thank you once again, Lauren, for today on a very hot topic. We changed the subject of what we were going to talk about, because sometimes this is what we need to do. We just need to discuss what's actually happening right now. And I thank you for being very open and honest, Lauren, with your thoughts of where we're at, in particular with international education. Let's hope that we get the change, we get international students back into Australia, and we get back to that #1 position of the biggest export out of Australia, because it was something I've always been proud of. And I think proud of this sector as well. And I think it could make a massive change. Thank you very much. Until next time, we'll see you at our next RTO Superhero Podcast.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you for joining us at the RTO Superhero Podcast with me, Angela Connell-Richards. Please take a moment to rate and review the podcast on your preferred podcast app. Each rating and review helps me fulfill my goal of helping training organisations around Australia to learn and grow in compliance and business success.